This story takes place in an abandoned village in the late 80s. A couple with their newborn child just moved into this village. The husband was a teacher in a school nearby. There was only one house in the same area. It was another couple and their kids. In this village, as it was the late 80s, it was an abandoned village with nothing around it. When the night falls, it turns pitch black outside. Because the school where the husband worked at was quite far away, the wife spent most of the night by herself, especially if the husband stayed outside with some friends in a nearby bar, which was a 30-minute walk from the house. The first night went by normally, but after a few days, especially when the wife was alone with her baby, things started to get a bit creepy. She sometimes heard voices and movements outside the house. She first thought it was probably an animal, until the voices became more clear, and they did not sound like an animal. So what could it be? She didn't want to check outside by herself and decided to wait for her husband. Once the husband was home, she told him what happened. The husband didn't believe her and told her that she was just paranoid and she was imagining stuff. The next few days went by okay, until one night where the wife was again alone with the baby at night. This time it was a bit late. The husband wasn't home yet, but she decided to go to bed. Just as she got into the bed, she heard the voices and the movements again. This time, they were even closer. She could hear footsteps, and the voices were more clear, not quite understandable, but you could tell that it was a human voice. She tried to ignore them and fall asleep, but they kept getting louder and louder until something was outside the window. She couldn't move. She was way too scared. At first, she thought it was a burglar, but then everything stopped and it got completely quiet. And then she heard her husband opening the door. She got a sense of relief. She didn't tell him anything that night because she knew that he wouldn't believe her. In the next few days, things went quietly until one night when the husband had to stay out late for work. This time, the wife decided to stay awake. Later that night, she started hearing the voices and the movements again. She gathered all her courage and went outside to check what was going on. Nothing. There was no one outside. And then the house door closed by itself. Thankfully, she had spare keys hidden in a pot. As she was getting the keys, she heard her baby laughing. So she checked through the window to see what was going on, only to be shocked. The baby was crawling towards the fireplace, and as it was winter and it was cold, it was on fire. She had to hurry up and get inside. She opens the door and gets her baby, but then she noticed something. The baby cage was open. She was pretty sure that it was locked and there was no way the baby could open it by itself. And then it was a bang on her window, and then the movements started again, but this time they were louder and closer. She decided to go back to her room and hide there with her child and wait for the husband to get home. But things started to get more creepy. The voices and the movements became inside the house, right outside her room. She started breathing heavily while trying to stay as calm as possible. But things kept getting crazier. The voices are now understandable. All she could hear was,
Leave this house. You are not welcome here.
repeatedly. And then, a knock on her window. She turns, and there was a black figure standing there. As she was about to burst out of the room and get out of the house, she felt a hand on her shoulder and a whisper. Her heart punched the inside of her chest. She couldn't move. She couldn't even scream. She even lost her breath. Then she somehow gathers her strength, grabs her child, and runs out of the house and goes straight to the neighbors. She started knocking on their door and kept knocking until they opened her door. Later that night, the wife explained everything to her husband and the neighbors. To her surprise, the neighbors already knew all of this and told her that the house had some sorts of spirits living in it and around it, as if they were keeping it safe. And one of the most known accidents that happened in that house was that a new couple moved into it, and they were all good. But the more they stayed in the house, the stranger they got. In the end, the husband died in a car crash, and the wife committed suicide by throwing herself from the roof. In her last days, she kept saying that they killed my husband, but no one knew what she was talking about. Anyway, the couple ended up moving to another city after the husband demanded a move to a different school. And the mystery of that house is still unsolved to this day.